Okay, so in the last one, we got VS Code set up correctly. And I realize I'm on a 2K monitor, so it might actually be a little bit difficult to read this text. So let me change that real quick. I just did Control comma to open up the settings. Let's look at the text editor and see if we can't change the font size. Terminal, that's the terminal font size. Text editor font 14, let's change that to like 18. See how that looks. Okay, that should be more legible. I hope. If you can't see, I mean, you can see my VS Code editor, but the text over here might still be a little small. Let's zoom in a little bit. Okay. So, we got our environment all set up. Let's start building this. So let's kind of plan what we're going to do first. I don't know if this is going to be the method I want to use to, mock up everything, namely using Photoshop, and I've got a tablet that I use for drawing and stuff. So let's see if this is actually a good idea. So what I want to do is fix the rotation first. What I want to do is kind of plan this out. So we've got, this is our whole app. I think that we'll have 2 columns. And we will have, so we'll have 2 columns. It's probably much easier ways of doing this, but that's okay. And in this first column, we'll have a big window that shows the word we're trying to type. And that's the first thing. That's the first thing that you see, right? Well, maybe not the first thing that you see, but the actual first element. And then we've got our bubbles. 5, 6, 7. And we'll start with 7. This is our core bubble right here. And then we'll have our buttons under here. So we'll have 3 buttons. So we'll have one to reset it, right? We'll have one to shuffle it. Is that the shuffle logo? Good enough. Yep. And then this will be our submit button. So let's just say submit. Okay. And well, you already saw the other example. It might be nice laying it out like this so we can kind of get a sense of what elements we need. So if you are at all familiar with Bootstrap, I'm going to be leaning on Bootstrap and Flexbox for all of this. So now we kind of have an idea of what the layout is. Well, I guess I should also mention, when you're typing out a word or you're clicking on these letters, obviously the letters will appear in this box. And if you hit submit and it's a valid word, then we'll have like a little badge is actually what they're called in Bootstrap, but just a little element here that has the word that we entered. So it has a list of all the successful words that we've entered. Okay, so let's do that. Let's make things. So minimize this. Well, I'm going to have it in my other window. If you have 2 monitors, it's very hard to go back to just one. Most definitely. So let's do that. So we'll add a row, and this is a Bootstrap class, and let's do .call 12.call medium 8, and let's do bg-warning, and then we'll do main window. I'm just going to copy that, and we'll change this to medium 4. If you aren't familiar with The Bootstrap grid system, Bootstrap 4 grid system specifically, I would advise you to look into that. So let's actually find it. Let's look it up so we have a link that you can use. So here's the grid system, okay? I could put all of this in a container. In fact, that might be cleaner to do that. So let's do that. So now everything is in a container. This is going to have its own inherent padding, which I might want to change. But with Bootstrap, it's super simple to do that. So secondary window, and let's just do if I look at the colors section of this documentation, you can see all these classes. So I'm using BG warning and BG. Let's use danger. I'm feeling dangerous. Okay. And now let's see. Let's close that guy. Get rid of the jQuery CDN because it's already loaded. So we'll save that. And you see, well, what the heck? I'm seeing it in two different windows. It's okay. It'll be fine. The reason for that is obviously this. The size of the window is smaller than the cutoff well, I guess it's not smaller than the cutoff to be medium. It's not big enough to trigger the medium class. That might be I might have said that in the exact same way, but there we go. Cool. So I think the container class that everything is wrapped in enforces a maximum size. So since I've got a 2K monitor, it's not going to span the entire width of my monitor, which is fine. Okay. So the other thing that I want to do is let's make the background color of this body. Let's add a class and say BG secondary. Is that a recognized, or let's do BGLite. BG secondary is a valid class, but I want to do it a little bit lighter. And I'm not seeing that color change. Let's see why. Why am I not seeing that color change? That class is valid, is it not? BG-Lite. BG-Lite. Like if I were to change this one to BG-Lite, maybe it is light. Maybe it's just very light. What are you warning? Okay. Is it just that light? I have flux on, so maybe it's less obvious, which actually let me disable that. Ah! Sorry if that was annoying you. It doesn't seem like it's a recognized class. For example, you're not seeing that in this list of this list shows all the CSS that's active on the selected element that I have, and there is none for this specific class. So for example, if I were to change this to BG warning, you see that I'm seeing I'm seeing CSS for that class. So why am I not seeing one for BGLite? Is it just a silly mistake that I'm making? Am I spelling light incorrectly? Like if I inspect this, you can see BGLite, background color, class equals. No, there's a T there. No, I'm not sure. We'll come back to it. Just kind of frustrating. In any event, what I want to do is enforce a height on these. So make sure that these are taking up the... Do I want this to be the full height? Let's see. let's look at the sizing classes we've got here in Bootstrap. So we've got 4 classes to change the height to a percentage of the view height, which you might want to do. I wish they had something where, like, on small devices, we set the height to 100. On large devices, 75. I don't know if you can do that with the height. You can definitely do it with the width. Max height 100. Let's try H75 on this row and see what that looks like. I'm guessing it's not going to work right out of the gate. And then let's do H100 on both of these. Guessing it's not going to work out of the gate. And I will show you why. Yep, so we don't see a change yet. And let's see the reason for that. Actually, if I were to explicitly declare the size of the parent element, like this container, so let's try that, like style height is, let's say, 600 pixels. And we bounce back over here and look at it. H75. I'm not seeing that H75 recognized. I think there's something funky with our Bootstrap class. Let me pause it real quick and make sure we got the right version. Give me one moment. Didn't have to look long. If you look here, you'll see we're using Bootstrap 3.3.7. So those of you who noticed that a while ago and were yelling at your computer, trying to get me to realize it, sorry about it. Good catch. I figured that the first CDN I would have found would have been the latest stable version. Apparently not. So let's see what we found. I looked up Bootstrap CDN. And then what did I go here? Okay, so that's for Bootstrap 3.3. Had I gone to the first one, you'll see this is 4.3. So let's grab this link instead, which will solve a few of our issues. So let's try that. You can see that now the background light class is recognized, and our new H75 classes are working correctly. So these H75 is, I think that's going to be 75% of its nearest parent that has a height declared. So if I were to get rid of this height 600 here, then that goes away, because it's like 75% of what? You have nothing, you have no height explicitly declared. So let me play around and see if there's a clean-ish way of setting the height of these. So let's say height, let's try 100 VH. Yeah, that's probably the best way. I might want to do that on the body, actually. So let me see if I can't do 100 VH. See if that's a recognized class. So these are percentages. Is there a view height class? Let's just look up Bootstrap view height. This is the same page, obviously. One nice trick you can do with Google searching is if I put quotes around this, it'll explicitly look for results that have these words in this order. So I can guarantee min VH. Okay. Is that a recognized Bootstrap class? Let's see. Let's do min VH 100. See if that works. Okay, that is, yep. So that enforces the minimum height to be 100%. I could do this similar to what I'm doing here, where I'm doing an inline style. But if we're using a library like Bootstrap, and they already have classes that let me do this, I would rather use those. So if I do h-100 here, for whatever reason, even though my body is taking up the entire view height, this isn't. This container isn't respecting that. Height is 100%. Let me get back to you. Okay, here was our problem. After some just quick Google searching, so since this is useful, I think understanding how I'm debugging stuff is just as useful, if not more useful, than seeing me actually build this. So let's just backtrack. I just looked up CSS height just to get an understanding of how this property works a little bit more. I'm not a big fan of W3 schools at all. I am a big fan of CSS tricks and developer.mozilla.org. So I just clicked on CSS tricks, and I noticed here it says if the height of the containing block is not specified explicitly and the element is not absolutely positioned, the value of its height computes to auto. Okay? So that tells me all I need to know. So if I made this a absolutely positioned element, this being the container, you can see that now my height is getting set correctly. So for example, I think if I get rid of this position absolute, I don't think that this element is technically explicitly, or the height is explicitly stated here. The minimum height is, but that's not the same as saying that the height itself is explicitly declared. So if I were to change this to height 100 VH, you can see, okay, now this child element, because its parent is now explicitly, the height of the parent is now explicitly declared, it knows what to work with. So min height and height are not synonymous, which is the issue that I was having. But if I'm declaring the height of the background as 100%, it seems redundant to set the height of this one to 100, when really I just want the height of this to be set, these guys to be set, relative to the body. So let's try, see if, okay, position is absolute, but now the width is funky. And that's because I changed the position to be absolute. Width inherent? No, that doesn't give me what I want. How do we want to do this? I'll be right back. Okay, so what I think I want to do is I'm fine with setting the view height of the body to 100% because that gives us this nice light background over the entire thing, or over the entire, I guess, app or page. But I don't necessarily want to explicitly set the height of these items yet. I think we should focus on actually getting the content in here. So let's do that. So we've got our input, which, do we want to actually make this an input? By that I mean straight up, do we want to do input, make it a text input, and then when we're actually selecting letters in the bubble, we're just appending those letters that were selected to this input. We could do it that way. Let's see. I'm just looking at the kind of input styles we have access to within Bootstrap. So we could do, just make it a form control. class equals form control. That doesn't look too bad. The only problem there is they can obviously type whatever letters they want. They're not limited to the letters in the bubble. Which there's a way around that, but I think the easiest thing is just making something other than an input. And it'll be easier to add functionality to like delete manually rather than relying on the input. It'll be easier to do that than to make an input and limit what letters they can actually type. So let's do the card dot. See how this looks. Dash, dash, dash. Okay. So card and card body are just, those are other Bootstrap classes. And I think that that'll be fine. Let's go ahead and add margins to this card. Let's see. Since there's already margins from the from this call 12 class, let's just set margins on the card on the y-axis. How about that? MY3. Yeah, I think that looks better. And then the text here, so we've got the card body. Let's say 4, which is another Bootstrap class. A little too big, I think. That's even bigger. Display 4 will do. Just kidding, that's what I wanted all along. And let's see. If we center it, if that looks good, okay, that looks cool. You know what I want to do? I want to put all this in their own classes with margins as well. And I'll show you why. Let's put these classes in these new divs that we're adding. Why am I not seeing that? M2, BG warning. This card is just taking up the entire container there. Very strange. So what I wanted is space between these two elements here, right? There's a little bit more breathing room. We can change it once we start adding those bubbles. So for the bubbles, don't want them in the card. We'll add another div. Let's just add a flex. I lean on Flexbox a lot. If you're familiar with Flexbox, or if you're not familiar with it, I'd recommend looking into it. It's super, super useful for positioning elements. So we've got a flex element, and this is going to be our bubble container. Bubble container, okay? And let's add one bubble. And the way we add those bubbles is, let's look at the radius element page, or the border radius page. You can see that I've got a great example of a, this is for images, I believe, but this will serve us just fine for what we're trying to do, which is just come up with some round object. And there's lots of different ways we can do this, but this is I think the quickest one, is we'll just have a div. Let's do dot bubble. And we've got our bubble. Okay, I'm just going to give it text for now. Really, that's going to have just the letter, right? So let's do, give it a white background. Let's add a couple of them. See what that looks like. It's got to be dflex is the actual class. Dflex. There we go. And I want to enforce a minimum size of these bubbles. So in our CSS class, let's do, oops. In our CSS class, let's do .bubble. Let's do 50 pixels, and then a height of 50, right? Let's see. We didn't see if our CSS is loaded. So we might not be actually loading that main.css, and indeed we are not. So let's do that here. Let's add a link. That's CSS. It's a style sheet, and we're referencing this main.css. Okay, there we go. So now we've got our bubbles. And I want to, since we're using Flexbox, it makes it easy to arrange these elements. So let's try justify content and scroll through this and see what we've got. Space around is nice. So if we look at the Bootstrap documentation for Flex, what sort of justify content classes do we have to do this for us? They do have a justify content around. There's one of them that Bootstrap doesn't have, and I thought it was justify content around, but they do indeed have justify content around. So let's add that. Great. What's bugging me though is I don't want this to take up the entire size of our container. So let me just change this back to M3. And for whatever reason, it's not respecting the top margin. And that might be something related to the card class. So if I get rid of the card class, let's see, it still isn't respecting it. I want there to be a margin on top of let's see, of this card. So I'm just going to say bg-white and find out why it's not respecting the top margin. And all I'm doing here is just scrolling through position and display classes or properties, values. Let me get back to you. Okay, I told you that I lean on Flexbox, and I'll show you why. If to this class, let's do this. Let's add a dflex class and do justify or flex direction column. Or no, I think it's just flex column. Flex column. Yeah. And then I change this to M3. That does what I wanted it to do. Now it's respecting the top margin. So when all else fails, throw a flex box on it and it fixes everything. Okay? Only half joking. So good. That looks great. I've got a little bit of breathing room between these two elements. I think too much. I think too much. I think that there's too much breathing room. So let me do MR2. Let me just do MR2 there. Yeah. Let's do MR2 there. Then to this one, we'll get rid of the margin declaration here. Oh, it's that. I think that's padding, actually. So PL0. PL0. I just want to get rid of the padding entirely, actually. So I have control of those margins and padding. And then we'll try, let's try MR3. See what that looks like. Yeah, I think that's fine. Okay, I've got just as much breathing room on the right side here, this right margin, as I do on the left. So I think that'll do fine. So in this one, we just played around with our margins and padding quite a bit. We got some rudimentary buttons in and our display area. So in the next one, we'll actually fix these buttons.